are white people being threatened? So it's hard to talk about race without either sounding racist or bluntly assuming everyone's the same way. But is the world becoming too liberal? Does immigration and movements like Black Lives Matter threaten the existence of the white population of Earth? Will our culture and history be lost to a growing movement of racial integration? And is our race threatened? Are we going to disappear from the planet? More importantly, what will that do for the rest of the human population on this planet? To answer this question, we must first explore history and biology to learn what lessons can be discovered, and more importantly, define what it means to be white. We must go back to 1785. A scientist by the name of Christopher Minus acknowledged two races, the Caucasians, or as he put it, beautiful, and the Mongolians, or as he put it, ugly. He believed the races to be of separate species. It was 1790 when Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, a German professor of medicine and a member of the British Royal Society, and who came to be considered one of the founders of the discipline of anthropology, who gave the term a wide audience. By grounding it in new methods of craniometry, that's the study of skulls, and linear taxonomy, that's the study of bones, he came up with the Caucasian variety, taking the name from the Mount Caucasus in Georgia, describing the white Georgians that lived there as most fitting of the Caucasian variety. In contrast to Minus, however, Blumenbach was a monogentist. He considered all humans to have a shared origin and to be a single species. In 1885, Joseph Mayer came up with a lexicon describing 5 different races. The Caucasian races, which includes Aryans, Hamites, and Semites. The Mongolian races, which includes Mongolians, Chinese, Indo-Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Tibetan, Malayan, Polynesian, Maori, Micronesian, Eskimo, and American Indian. And the Negroid races, African, Hottentots, Melanesians, Papu, Negrito, Australian Aborigine, Dravidians, and Sinhalese. But it would be Johann Friedrich Blumenbach that came up with the 5 races that the police still use today. They include the American Indian or Alaskan Native, the Asians, the Blacks or African Americans, the Hawaiians or other Pacific Islanders, and the Whites. For the purposes of this video, I'm talking about white European indigenous people, or Caucasians as they're also known, even though certain Mongolians and Japanese people can also have white skin. So how did Europeans evolve white skin? Well, it's thought by modern scientists that modern Europeans don't look like those of 8,000 years ago. By comparing key parts of the DNA across the genomes of 83 ancient individuals from archaeological sites throughout Europe, the international team of researchers reported earlier this year that Europeans today are a mix of blending of at least 3 ancient populations of hunter-gatherers and farmers who moved into Europe in separate migrations over the past 8,000 years. The study revealed that a massive migration of Yamanayan herders from the steppes north of the Black Sea may have brought Indo-European languages to Europe about 4,500 years ago. When it comes to skin colour, the team found a patchwork of evolution in different places, and 3 separate genes that produced light skin, telling a complex story for how European skin evolved to be much lighter during the past 8,000 years. The modern humans, who came out of Africa to originally settle in Europe about 40,000 years ago, are presumed to have had dark skin and moved because of disease and limited resources. They were essentially refugees of the time. The dark skin was advantageous in sunny latitudes, and the new data confirmed that about 8,500 years ago, early hunter-gatherers in Spain, Luxembourg, and Hungary also had darker skin. They lacked versions of 2 genes that led to depigmentation, and therefore pale skin in Europeans today. But in the far north, where low light levels would favour pale skin, the team found a different picture in the hunter-gatherers. 7 people from the 7,700-year-old Motala archaeological site in southern Sweden had both light skin gene variants. Now, back when early European settlers came into Europe, they would have come across the Neanderthals, an entirely different species of early human. At least 1.5 to 2.1% of the Neanderthal genome still exists in humans today, influencing things like skin, hair, and the diseases people have today. Recent findings reveal that Neanderthals interbred with our ancestors of modern humans, when modern humans began spreading out of Africa perhaps about 40,000 to 80,000 years ago. Contrary to popular belief, Neanderthals were intelligent, making tools, fire, and clothing, and they were much better adapted for living in the cold Ice Age Europe. But Neanderthals were less social than humans. Having large eyes meant less frontal lobes than humans, dedicating the Neanderthal brain to vision and body control. Humans would have had a more extended vocabulary than the Neanderthals, and humans had bigger clans. We don't know why the Neanderthals died out, but their DNA still exists within Europeans and Asians of today. So why were European settlers so successful compared to other settlers in, say, Africa, America, Asia? European settlers were particularly lucky. Their intelligence evolved for their specific environment. For example, they needed to invent fire to stay warm. They had a more temperate climate than, say, African people to reserve energy and build things. They got there a lot earlier than, say, the American and Australian Aboriginals, and had more time to develop civilizations. Europe is full of forests, landmarks, quarries, and the Mediterranean seas, all in a smaller area than the rest of the world. And the Greeks even selectively bred people who were stronger and more intelligent, making European settlers the best adapted for the European environment. When the first farmers came from the Near East, they carried both genes for light skin, as they interbred with the indigenous hunter-gatherers. One of their light skin genes swept through Europe, so that Central and Southern Europeans also began to have lighter skin. Now, the Roman Empire wasn't as racist as you might assume. Roman writers describe people with physical characteristics of sub-Saharan Africans as Ethiopians, but the term carried no social implications. There was no such thing as a black community. Immigrants from the south of the Sahara were few and from disparate ethnic communities. The immigrants would have been separated from each other in households of white people, and if they had descendants, these would have blended in within very few generations into the local populations. While slavery was a deeply stigmatized social status, the great majority of slaves were from European and Mediterranean populations. Inherited physical characteristics were not relevant to slave status. Black people were generally not excluded from any profession, and there was usually no bias against mixed-race relationships. And of course, to assume that black people have always been slaves and white people haven't is entirely wrong. White people have been slaves, from the Slavic slaves of the Vikings, Christian slavery in Muslim Spain in the 15th century, the slave markets that flourished in the Barbary coast of North Africa between the 15th and 18th century, the Ottoman slave trade, and of course modern-day slavery. But it's what white people did that makes them the most infamous race on earth. Enslaving black people in colonial times, pillaging Aboriginal people of America and Australia, leaving former European colonies to rot, and starting 2 world wars. But today, the white people are a mixed bag of people from all over the world. They include the Mediterranean people from countries like Spain, Italy, Greece, the Antillid people from the British Isles, the Nordic people from the north. They normally have wavy hair, light eyes, and reddish skin. Nordic literally means north. The East Baltic people from the Baltic region, including Russia, Finland, and Estonia. The Alpines people from Central Europe. The Dinarics, also called Adriatics, from Central and Southeastern Europe, the Turanids from Central Asia, which includes Turkish people, the Armenioids from West Asia, the Iranids from Iran or Afghanistan, and the Arabids from the Arabian Peninsula, and the Hamatics. These include the Egyptian people. In the Bible, one of the sons of Noah is called Ham, describing these people. So white people are a wide range, a plethora of mix of culture, religions, races, world locations, but they're also the race that's most under threat. The top 5 countries with foreign-born populations are white. They include the USA, Germany, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the United Kingdom. Now granted, foreign born might not necessarily mean non-white. For example, a Mexican immigrant in the USA is still essentially a white person. But it's no wonder that the white population of the world feels most threatened. But if you take a look at infant mortality rates, this is the places where people are most likely to die as an infant under 5, and apart from Afghanistan, which obviously is a war zone, the other 4 places are of black African nations. They include Mali, Somalia, the Central African Republic, and Guinea-Bissau. So it's what white people did in colonial times that made things worse for them. In 1998, the American Anthropological Association said that racial groups were 94% varied within those racial groups. People are only 6% the same in different geographical regions. Skin colour is not related to nose shape or hair colour, therefore it's too subjective to define races. Not fair to a race to reveal it to be in a perpetual low status. So biologically speaking, there's no such thing as a race, but socially and politically, there's something to be said about the colour of one's skin and the way the world reacts to you. In the future predictors predict that as the world becomes more multicultural and inclusive, that people will breed with each other, and eventually mixed race people will become more common. Christianity and other white American associated things such as crime rates have to be dealt with separately to white skin. It's not causal of white skin, it's caused by racism and social inequalities of poverty. The injustices of colonialism, slavery and war have created rising immigration that threatens our ability to get along. Immigration is more numbers of people, which is bad. A country can only cope with so many. But the only differences we have are ones that we create and ones that we perceive, which is part of being human. The fears that Europeans have about other races is ingrained in European DNA. We were once refugees ourselves, escaping disease and lack of resources in Africa and moving to Europe and Asia. We conquered the Neanderthals and saw them die out. We built huge empires, and then we blew our own doors off by enslaving, pillaging, and mistreating people of other races. Just because we're white doesn't mean we're better. Things change anyway, so why should we worry? But sometimes it's important to peacefully, and I stress peacefully, keep our own tribes, and I hope the world doesn't forget that either. Or our story, just like the story of the Neanderthals, could be lost to history. But do you agree with me? Join in the debate below and subscribe.